All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by St. Louis head coach Josh Schertz. And Josh, welcome. When was the first time you saw Cocktail?
Oh gosh, when it first came out, I was I was a huge fan. Great movie. Loved it. Probably in the was it 80s, mid 80s it came out, the late 80s. So
Late
probably I
80s.
was late 80s. So probably 12, 13 years old. So it was saw it a couple times and then lived my own, at least in my own mind, I had that experience there a couple weeks ago. But from the looks of it, when I saw the video, didn't quite have the same panache as Tom Cruise in that as a bartender.
No, and it looked like during that moment on social media, after you had a big win a couple weeks ago in Atlantic 10 play and you were tending bar for the St. Louis students, that you were really, really enjoying the ride. Are coaches really a profession where you're allowed to do that as much as you really need to?
I think people sometimes struggle with that. I don't know. I mean, for me, I think joy and humor and having fun and being able to take what you do incredibly seriously and not take yourself too seriously. I think that's probably a pretty good space to be in. I think you can be super competitive and still have fun and enjoy yourself, and there's time for everything. So I've never been one that, I think I've been able to keep a pretty good, at least my own mind perspective and not, I do take basketball serious. I'm certainly, like everybody in this space, super competitive. But I don't take myself too serious. I can have a good time. I can detach from basketball, go do stuff, and then I think that makes me better in terms of when I have to lock in and go to work.
Do you have a greater appreciation for all this because you were at the Division II level for so long?
Probably. I think so. I think, I spent 13 years at Lincoln Memorial and when you're at that level, there's a lot of great things about, Division II basketball and certainly it's a great learning place. But I think, when you're at that level for that long, and I was also an assistant Division II for a long time, so I spent most of my career at that level.
Yeah.
I think you're in it for the right reasons. There's not any media, there's not a lot of fanfare. You kind of do your work, and it's a great learning tool and learning place for young coaches to grow.
Was it harder to go from Division II to Indiana State or Indiana State to St. Louis?
In terms of level and jump
Basketball.
and
Yeah,
basketball,
basketball.
it was honestly, I tell people, you know, both were a little bit jarring. I was, I knew the jump from D2 to the Missouri Valley was going to be significant because I kind of skipped a step of usually you go D2 to a low major, then you go low major to mid major, and I went straight from D2 to mid major at Indiana State, and then when I made the jump last year, I was amazed at how much bigger and more athletic the A10 was. It was eye-opening for me going through it my first time, and to think, man, so it was good for me. There's a lot of growth, but certainly it was eye-opening in terms of what we need to do with the roster to put a roster together that could compete at the top end of the A10, and the nuanced differences between like our teams, the top teams in Missouri Valley could certainly compete at the top end of the A10. It's the depth of the leagues, 1 through 14. That's the difference. The coaching in both leagues is terrific. The top, like that year I was at Indiana State, like us and Drake and Bradley and those top end teams could certainly go the A10 and compete on equal footing, but it was the depth and then the size and athleticism that was a jarring difference.
How does being the head coach at Lincoln Memorial compare to being the head coach at Indiana State or St. Louis?
Each stop's been different. You're not, I don't get any requests to do any media when I was the only media we got at LMU was when we got to number 1 in the country, which we did a few times. Then we had a little media surge and then it went away. And there was, and everything is not as scrutinized. There was no Twitter accounts. There was none of that other stuff that goes with these jobs. I think Indiana State was a great segue because, it was a bigger stage. It was a bigger pool. But St. Louis is almost like an NBA team with the media,
Right.
Because we don't have an NBA team, and there's not another, a mid-major plus or high major in the area We don't have football. So, almost, St. Louis Billikens basketball, along with the Cardinals and the Blues and the City and soccer, is kind of like one of the professional teams here. And so that media piece here, and being in a big city like this where you have as much more attention, I think it's been good that I don't know that I would have been good at I started
Right.
here and then gone. I think the progression for me has been exactly the progression I needed for every step to kind of figure out, three different areas, three different levels, and I think each level is preparing me for the next step.
And obviously, the common denominator has been having really, really good teams. You had a great team 2 years ago at Indiana State. And, Josh, doing this now 20 years, a lot of coaches have told me that the most pressure that they've ever felt is when you're in a mid-major conference tournament and you're in a one-bid league. Have you personally ever felt more pressure in coaching than when you were playing Drake in the Arch Madness title game in 2024 at Indiana State?
I was probably naive enough at that point. We were like 27 to net. I didn't think there was any chance we weren't getting in. I felt like, not
Right.
that you're playing with house money. I mean, you want to win the tournament because you're competitive, and you want to win the tournament because it's a championship. But you win the ninth best league in the country that year in net, I think we won it by 2 games. And you're at that point, I think we were around 25, 26 in the net. And even after we lost, it took a historic week of bid steals. I think there were 6 bid stealers that week.
Yeah.
It took a historic, bid stealing week to knock us out. So, but no, you feel the pressure. I mean, I think, when you're in a league, the worst place to be as a coach, or a fan or anybody, is in the best one bid league in the country. That would be the worst place to be
Yeah.
for anybody. And so I think that's when you're talking about the Missouri Valley, you're talking about the Atlantic 10, how do we drive bids? That's where every conversation is. And so, I think going in that tournament, I felt like we were going to have 2 bids in the Valley. It didn't work out that way. But even now, with being 23-1, you feel the weight of every game because, every game you're judged differently than you are at the high major level.
What was it like during that week after you lost to Drake? Because that game is 7 days before Selection Sunday. What was it like having to wait 7 days to see your fate?
That was probably the worst week of my life, honestly. It was, I mean, it really was. I mean, I've had a pretty charmed existence. I haven't had that many terrible weeks in my life, but you're just sitting there because everything is out of your control.
Yeah.
And everything in my life, I try to really lock into the things I can control and really not worry about stuff that's outside of that. I think it's a great life hack, when you can just lock into things that are you're controllable. And we lost to Drake, which was in our control, and we didn't get the job done. And then everything else, the whole week is just sitting there and watching all these results, and then every single result you're looking for goes against what you needed to be. And didn't get any help from my friends. I mean, Dusty Mays at FAU, they lose in the semis or whatever. I mean, I couldn't get help from anybody. All my buddies were losing, and you look up and we got to Selection Sunday, and then we knew it was looking highly, unlikely
Right.
that we were gonna get a bid, just because we knew there was gonna be, at that point there was 6 bid stealers, and the way the bracketology was coming out.
You're in the middle of a dream season now at St. Louis. You're 23-1. You're a fluke shot from Stanford away from being 24-0. I mean, right now everything's going great, but because of what you went through 2 years ago, do you have a little bit of PTSD to know that, we have to win as many games as possible because a couple of losses here down the stretch and we may be taking fate out of our hands again?
Yeah, I don't know if it's PTSD. I think it goes back to but I mean, I certainly obviously remember it well. But I think, what we talk about in our program a lot is, you know, internal standards over external conversations. There's gonna be a lot of external stuff about, we're a lock, we're this, we're that. I think, to me, you're a lock for the NCAA tournament when you can lose every single game remaining on your schedule and still get in as an at-large.
Okay.
Right? Like, that to me would signify that you're a lock. Anything else other than that is obviously not a lock. I told the guys this: we've had a very good season to this point. We have a chance in the next 3-4 weeks to make it a great season, and then you can't have a special season unless you perform in the postseason. So
Right.
I think all those things are true. I think our programmatical stuff, like the internal standards of be where your feet are. be present, stack days, be relentless in pursuit of progress, those type of things. We got to keep ourselves grounded because at the end of the day, we've won 23 games. We've won 11 conference games. If we finish 23-8 and 11-7 in the A10, there's not going to be an NCAA tournament to worry about. We'll be happy to accept an NIT bid. So, we have a lot of work to do between now and the end of the season to position ourselves. And so I think that's where the experience 2 years ago, just stay present, keep working, stay connected to those and internal standards over external conversations, which are all going to be about, the future. And we got to lock into the present because competition happens in the present.
Now, because of what you just said, because of what would happen if you did lose every game, and because of what you went through in 2024, does that make you as a coach envy those who are in multi-bid leagues and power conferences?
Well, it's a little bit, it's certainly a better situation where, you can go, 6-12 in your league and get to the tournament than it is to have to go 16-2 in your league to get to the tournament. It goes back to the old question, is it easier for a team like, and just take us out, is it easier for a team like St. Mary's to go 16-2 in the West Coast Conference or go 6-12 in the SEC? Could the teams that are 6-12 in the SEC go 16-2 in the West Coast Conference? And I think that's the question that, when you look at committees, like you have to answer, and really be thought about. And I get it, both ways. I have a lot of friends at the high major level who are like, man, every game's this and that. I think when every game you play is a quad 1 or quad 2, I think it, the perspective becomes, every win is a great win and every loss is not a bad loss.
Right.
And at this level, every loss is debilitating and every win is like, well, yeah, you got to win those games. And so I always joke because my brother follows all this stuff and basically the gist I get from him is, every game that's a quad 1 or quad 2 is a must win because you don't get many of those opportunities. And every game that's quad 3 or quad 4 is a must win because you can't have a bad loss. So it just seems like you just got to go 31-0 and then everything's fine. So I think that's the pathway, I guess, is when you're at this level. But certainly, my hope is that the Atlantic 10, I think, deservedly so, is a multi-bid league, and we want to win every game remaining, regular season, conference tournament, etc. But I do think I certainly have envy of those that can get 6-12 and get in versus having to go 16-2.
How does the 2024 Indiana State team compare to the 2026 St. Louis team?
That's a great question. A lot of differences, but a lot of similarities. I think every championship team I've been a part of has some same hallmarks, in terms of how connected guys are, the commitment to work, the ability to stack days, how intentional, deliberate they are with their work process, the way they're able to enjoy each other's success, the maturity level, the resilience inside of competition, the ability to put and prioritize winning. We talk a lot about that, how uncommon that is in today's world. It's easy to talk about prioritizing winning, but it's so easy to prioritize stats, money, attention, so many other things that can get in the way of really team success mattering. And for both those teams, unbelievable sacrifice, great players who care about each other, who were committed to the work, who had unbelievable competitive character. And I think, this team's deeper. Certainly we're playing 9 guys that we played 6.5 on the Indiana State team. We certainly, both teams though, have a lot more similarities than differences. Even if you go back to my time at LMU, it's the same thing. A lot more overlap than differences. The personnel is different. The way we play is slightly different. The depth on this team is the best I've ever had. This is the most athletic team, I've had, and probably collectively the best shooting team I've had. And so there's those things, but there's a lot more similarities between those teams than differences.
How is St. Louis 23-1?
Great players. I mean, great players that have been, and a great staff too. I think, we have, one of the best staffs in college basketball. I put ours up against anybody in college basketball. We obviously have tremendous players, but our staff on a daily basis, Zach Bovair, Anton Gray, Corey Tate, Rob Gardner, Phil Gaetano, Brett Putz, and all the way down to Jason Fang, Alex Peebler, Sam Mervis. Those guys are unbelievable what they do on a daily basis. We have terrific players. Like I tell our guys all the time, this is not a feel-good story. It's not a Cinderella story. We have great players, and they've come together. They sacrifice. They put team success above individual stuff. They have balanced, ambition versus agenda. I think they've been able to find we have a lot of ambitious guys in that locker room in terms of what they want to accomplish individually and what they want to accomplish collectively, but they've not allowed agendas to seep into it. It's made for an incredible journey when you have talent and you have competitive character and you have guys that prioritize winning. It makes every day fun, and these guys really pull for each other. Super connected, super talented, super competitive group.
And you've prioritized shooting and obviously great offense. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes your team such an unbelievable watch because it's so elite at shooting the basketball. I'm curious, though, who taught Josh Schertz how to coach offense?
Gosh, that's a good question. I've learned from friends. I've learned from coaches I never even met that I watch. I'm one of those people. I don't really have any hobbies, so basketball is kind of my life outside of my family,
Yeah,
my
me too.
boys, my wife, and basketball. There's really, I don't golf. I don't outside of the night at Humphreys. I'm not out, hanging out. My wife knows I'm on vacation. We'll go somewhere nice, but I bring my computer with me. I study. I have friends that I learn, a ton from. Whether I pick up the phone and, Dusty May, Ben McCollum, those guys were constantly in contact talking. But Ryan Pannone, I mean, just got a list of guys, and then guys the NBA level, and so it's kind of I guess a conglomeration of an aggregate of all these different things I've learned. You put it together, then you bend it to the personnel. It's different how we're playing now than it was at Indiana State. It's different last year, and it'll be different next year because I think that's part of growing up in D2. As you learn how to bend. I think the two things D2 teaches you, or lower level teaches you, is you better trust your own evaluations because none of the players you're recruiting are ranked. So there's
Right.
nobody to rank or compare rankings to. You better learn to trust your evals, and then you better learn, because you're down the food chain, how to bend your system to the strengths of your personnel, and not the
Good point.
personnel to your system. And I think those two things I learned in my time at Lincoln Memorial.
And, one of the guys that's been an integral part of your system at the last two places you've coached, St. Louis and Indiana State, has been Robbie Avila. And look, you guys are 23-1. It is a magical, magical journey right now for St. Louis basketball. But even if you win a national championship in early April in Indianapolis, the season is only going to last 2 more months. What is it going to be like for Josh Schertz the final time that he says goodbye to Robbie Avila as a player?
Yeah, no, it'll break my heart. I love him like a son. And having him every day the last 4 years has been an absolute joy. His family, Katie Juan, his Grace and his brother Juan. I mean, those guys are just what an unbelievable human being. I'm not in the position I'm in today without him. And it's funny. When you're around people, at Indiana State, I had Cam Henry. I had him for 6 years. Because of COVID and redshirt. And I had Xavier Bledson was on my Indiana State team, was sixth man of the year for 6 years.
Yeah.
Same thing. And when you coach people that long, I mean, it's just weird to go to practice the next year and they're not there. I remember looking around like, where's Cam Henry? Where's Xavier Bledson? I'll do the same thing in the summer. I'll look around and go, man, I miss having Robbie. And it's different. Your relationships are the holy grail of this deal is relationships. Robbie will be a part of my life the rest of my life. My relationship may be the same, but it's different. You don't see somebody every day. And I'll miss coaching them. I'm trying to soak up every day. I feel an incredible responsibility, this year to a lot of people, to our fans, to the people that brought me to St. Louis. But my biggest responsibility this year to me, that weighs heaviest on me, is to him. I want to make sure he goes out, the right way. That this year is, because he's what he's done for me, for my family, for Indiana State, for St. Louis. I can never repay him in 10 lifetimes. So I want to make sure he goes out the right way.
And there's a lot of guys, obviously, that will be alongside him as you continue to march on with this journey. And there's so many guys that have taken seats at the table for you through the first 24 games. Trey Green, who started his career at Xavier. Brady Dunlap, who had a cup of coffee at St. John's for a couple of years. Also, Ishan Sharma, who had power conference experience. But for you, from where you sit, who is the wild card for St. Louis here over the next 4 or 5 weeks to not just make the Billikens obviously a team that's going to be in the NCAA tournament, but a team that might have a chance to advance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would probably say that's Amari McCoughtry for us.
Okay.
When we get the best version of Amari, he's as good a player as there is in the Atlantic 10, 6'6", 7 foot plus wingspan, guards 1 through 5, can play ball in hand, can dominate games when he's at his best. And so he's a young kid. He's a sophomore. He's maturing, and getting to his best identity and his best version. If we can get that more consistently, when he's at his best, I think he's as impactful to winning as any player in the Atlantic 10 in terms of the amount of ways he can put his fingerprints on the game on both ends of the floor. I think that's the biggest wild card for us. I think we're pretty consistent with the guys you mentioned. Even the Deion Browns and Kellen Thames and Paul Otieno.
Yeah.
But Amari to me is the guy that can move that needle and take us from where we are to where we need to get to make a run.
Josh, in doing this as long as I have, I'm always fascinated at how coaches hold on to their tough losses more than they celebrate their great wins. For Josh Schertz, give me one win you always hold near and dear to your heart, and give me one tough loss that always seems to resonate.
Gosh, so win. Maybe Final Four in 2016, we beat West Liberty.
Okay.
And just one of the great games. Jim Crutchfield is a good friend of mine. He's now the head coach at Nova Southeastern. We beat them in maybe one of the best Elite Eight Final Four games of all time, 103, 102, I believe, in regulation. And it was not both teams were guarding. It was just unbelievable game. Maybe best I've been a part of as a coach. And so that one probably sticks with me because it got us to the national championship. Loss, 32-1 team when I was at LMU 2018 in the regional championship to Queens, and we had the best team in the country. We were 32-1. Queens was 30-3. We had beaten them 3 times before, so they were 30-0 against everybody else. We have to play them a 4th time because the way the D2 regional stuff works, and we lose at home in the regional championship. And I was that loss was even more than national championship or NIT. There's been some crushing ones.
Yeah.
I won't mention Stanford, but there's been some. Stanford might be the most improbable loss, but
Yeah.
that was probably the most crushing.
That was definitely a crazy finish with Benny Gieler making that shot. Give me a recruit that you really wanted since you've been a head coach that you just missed out on.
God, there's so many. Recruit I really wanted. Probably the most ironic one. I'll give you a good. It's not that I missed out, but I go to recruit in May. I watch this kid play. He's big, like 6'3", 6'4" point guard. He's playing, and I watch him. I'm intrigued. I go back, and I actually missed dinner with my wife to go watch him a 3rd time. I'm at Lincoln Memorial, and so I wound up talking to the coach. The kid's he's like, he's a senior. He just played the senior year. He averaged like 1 or 2 points a game as a high school senior. And so long story short, his mom had passed, and had this whole great story. He's an Orlando kid. And so I wound up talking to the kid, and we arrange it that he's going to walk on at Lincoln Memorial.
Okay.
And so now he's going to play the summer on the circuit, and long story short, he plays pretty well, and some prep schools get involved, and then the kid ghosts me, and I'm calling him because I'm watching his games and I'm following him, and I know he's going to be a pretty good player.
Right.
And very long story short, in August or July, late July, the kid reaches back out to me and had ghosted me for about a month and a half. And then the aunt, who was the mom's sister, who was kind of his guardian, and we have this whole conversation about it. He wants to come to LMU, and I'm like, hey, I was taking him as a walk-on. He averaged 1 point a game and 1.5 points a game as a senior. I'm not doing it. Goes back and forth. They're like begging me to do it. Don't do it. Turns out the kid goes to prep school, has a good year, goes to Ohio, and Jason Preston, who winds up getting drafted in the NBA, was going to come to LMU as a walk-on, and my pride got in the way of Jason Preston being a rail splitter at Lincoln Memorial, and we were the first to kind of lay eyes on him that May. So that's one I always kick myself on is never let pride get in the way of doing the smart thing, and that was certainly pride overruling intelligence. I obviously didn't know he was going to be an NBA first-round pick, but thought he was going to be pretty good. But Jeff Bowles got to reap the benefits of that.
No doubt. And that Ohio team, as we remember, advanced in the NCAA tournament.
Correct.
Against Virginia in the bubble in 2021. So that's an incredible story. St. Louis is also an incredible story. 23-1, a fluke finish away from being 24-0. But I'm curious, because coaches are never satisfied. What are the biggest things that you still think your team can improve on to be an even tougher out on Selection Sunday and beyond?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of areas. We certainly got to be better in the possession game. Like we have to be in really in the four areas that drive that. We got to force more turnovers. I think we're taking pretty good care of the ball. Our defensive rebounding can be better, and our offensive rebounding has dipped here over the last few games in terms of getting misses back. So I think the possession game is an area we can grow in. I think understanding offensively better, our rim decision percentage, getting that consistently up where it needs to be. So we're not, wasting possessions, where we're taking tough shots to the rim and making the right play for each other. And so understanding cutting, I think we can continue to get better in terms of our off ball movement offensively. And so there's always things that you can grow into and be better at. I think it's a never ending. What you're trying to do, I think, for every coach at this time of year is what your best version looks like, and our best version is really good. I think our best version is good enough to play with and beat most everybody in the country. It's how do you get to your best version more consistently over the 40 minutes, knowing that you don't arrive in a state and just stay there. It's not perpetual. You're going to have
Yeah.
your ups and downs, but how do we more consistently inside of possessions in a game and more games over the next 40, the next whatever stretch for 40 minutes, get to our best identity as consistently as possible. And that's what we're really pushing towards as we get in here this February, March, kick run.
All right, Josh, let's wrap on this. Let's say this all becomes a movie one day from, when you started at Lincoln Memorial to Indiana State to now at St. Louis to obviously tending bar for students a couple of weeks ago. Who plays Josh Schertz?
I'm thinking like Brad Pitt or George Clooney. One of them probably does. People would probably say Jason Alexander or Danny DeVito, but I'm going with Brad Pitt, George Clooney, maybe Denzel. Get Denzel in there. Get one of these guys, Leonardo DiCaprio. Who knows? Somebody like Will Smith, maybe. So somebody like that, I would prefer. But knowing my luck, it'll be Danny DeVito or Jason Alexander will be playing me for sure.
Well, your luck has been pretty good so far this season. A great team with a great season, 23-1, the Billikens. Josh, we appreciate the time. Know how busy you are, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Sounds great. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You got it. That's St. Louis head coach Josh Schertz. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.